Have you ever been asked this question? Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? Have you ever been asked that? And maybe you've thought, 5 years' time? I haven't got a bloody clue where I'll get myself to next Wednesday or see myself next Wednesday. I haven't got a clue. But seriously though, why do we put so much pressure on ourselves to have everything figured out? You know, as human beings, we need to control everything. That's what we do. We have to have the plan. We have to have the purpose and the destination, and we go for the 5-year vision or the 10-year vision or the retirement plan we want for ourselves. You know, we're always thinking of that next move. We're always thinking ahead of ourselves. What are we going to do with our lives? Because that's what we do. We have to be in control. We have to think, who are we going to become? And when you look at it, it's absolutely exhausting just thinking about it. And I wonder how many of us have actually stayed somewhere, have actually stayed in a situation or a place that no longer feels right to us, simply because we don't know exactly where we're supposed to go next. Think about that. Just think about that for a moment. Maybe you know that you want something to change. Maybe you know things have got to be different, but you don't know how and you don't know what. Maybe your life is pretty good. Maybe it's, you know, it's not terrible. Maybe on paper it looks amazing. You've worked hard. You've built a career. You've raised a family, perhaps. You know, you've always paid your bills on time. You've done those responsible adult things, you know, you've ticked all the boxes. And yet, every now and again, usually in those quiet moments when nobody's around and you're sitting there on your own and nobody's needing anything from you or wanting anything, maybe there's that little voice inside of you that just quietly says, is this it? Is this really how I want the next chapter of my life to look? And then maybe immediately another voice jumps in and says to you inside your head, well, what do you want then? And you think to yourself, I haven't got a clue. I don't know what I want. And today, you know, I want to tell you something I wish somebody had told me years ago. You don't need to know exactly where you're going. You just need to know that where you are isn't where you want to stay. Hi guys, this is Tina Willis and welcome back to my podcast, and I'm so glad you're back here with me today. So we are going to talk about something today, and we're going to talk about not having all the answers. You do not have to be in control of everything. You do not have to know everything, because maybe not knowing everything isn't a problem. Maybe not knowing everything isn't the problem we've made it out to be. Just maybe it's actually where something new begins for you. Think about that. I mean, when did we decide that we had to have it all figured out? When did we decide that? So think back to when you were young. And that's a long way back for me. You know, people constantly asked you, so what do you want to be when you grow up? Do you remember that? What do you want to be when you grow up, Tina? As if at 10 years old, I was supposed to know. Go figure, you know? And then you leave school and suddenly people say to you, so what are you going to do for a job? You know, what career are you going to have? Because you've got to go out and get a job. You've got to go out and go work hard. So what are you going to do? And then the next question would be, so don't you think it's about time you got married and settled down? Or Don't you think, it's about time you got on the property ladder, go and buy a house, Don't you think it's about time you had children? Are you going to have children? Don't you think it's about time that you got promoted in work? Have you got a 5-year plan? What's it going to be? All these questions that people keep asking over and over and over and over again. And somewhere along the way, life starts to feel like this big, enormous checklist. Tick, tick, tick. And if we haven't got the next box ready to tick, we start feeling as that we're falling behind. But behind who? Because we're so conditioned, aren't we? That's the normality for us. And that's what I'd like to know. Behind who? Why do we fall behind? Because we're not falling behind anybody. Because I actually don't remember receiving that official manual that told us where we were all supposed to be by the age of 20, by the age of 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and so on and so forth. Do you? Did you get a manual that you had to fill in and tell people where you needed to be by that age? And yet we compare ourselves all the damn time. We look around, we seem to see somebody, who appears to know exactly what they're doing with their life. And we think, oh my God, they've got it all sorted. They've got their life sorted. Why haven't I? But can I tell you something? Most people haven't got it sorted. Most people are just figuring it out as they go along too, just like you. The difference is that some are just better at making it look all organised on social media, on Facebook, But here's something deeper underneath all of this. And I think this really particularly happens when you've spent years, and I mean years, being everything to everybody else. And think about that. Maybe you've been an employee. Maybe you've been a manager, a wife, a mum, a husband, a dad, a daughter, a carer, a provider. Maybe you've been the dependable one, the one that everybody rings if they're in trouble or if they want to have a moan about somebody, if they want to talk about something. You're the one everybody rings. You're the one that sorts everything out. And then one day, somebody says to you, what do you want? What do you want? Somebody asks you for a change. What do you want? And all there is silence because you don't know anymore. You haven't got a clue. And that's not because there's nothing inside of you. Quite the opposite, actually, But it's because that maybe just perhaps you've spent so long listening to what everybody else wants, listening to what everybody else needs, that you've actually stopped listening to your heart, that you've actually stopped listening to yourself. And you know what? I know that feeling. Because for such a long, long time, my life was dictated by what needed doing next. I was stuck in that corporate life of targets and budgets and meetings and deadlines and emails and people and problems. It was a never-ending roller coaster. It was just Groundhog Day every day. It was get up, go to work, sort everything out, come home, cook the tea if we had time or get a takeaway, sleep, and then start again. Groundhog Day. And there wasn't much space for what I really, really wanted. What did I actually want? And then when I actually, actually did start asking myself that question, do you know what? I actually couldn't give myself an answer. I actually couldn't give myself some beautiful, profound answer because I didn't suddenly know exactly what I wanted. I didn't suddenly know exactly what my future looked like. I didn't have this incredible master plan for my life. I just simply knew one thing, that I didn't want to feel the way I felt anymore. I didn't want to feel that burnout and that loss of me. And sometimes, and I'm telling you this from the heart, sometimes that's enough. Sometimes the expression, I don't want this, is the beginning. And we often dismiss knowing what we don't want, knowing that we don't want this, because I think that's incredibly powerful to know that you don't want something. I didn't want to feel exhausted all the time. That was information to me. I didn't want my whole life controlled by corporate life. That was information for me. I didn't want to wake up one day and realize that I had spent my entire life waiting for retirement. That was information for me. I didn't want to keep saying one day. That was information. I was building up all this information, I didn't want to feel lost and feel like I disappeared inside my own life. So you might not know what the destination is yet, but you're beginning to recognize the direction. And that is so damn important. So damn important that you recognize what you don't want. Because, sometimes we don't discover what we want by sitting down and thinking harder. Sometimes we just discover it by moving on, by taking action. You don't need to know the whole map. Imagine this. Imagine you're about to take a long journey. All right, you're taking a long journey somewhere. Would you expect to see every single mile of the road before you left home? Of course not. You might know roughly where you're heading. You might know which direction you're traveling. But you cannot see every turn. You cannot see every bump in the road. You cannot see every sign that gives you, diversions or roadworks or how busy the traffic's going to be. You might end up taking a wrong turn. I've done it many of a time, even with sat nav. You might even decide halfway on your journey or halfway there, well, you know what? I actually don't want to go there anymore. You might decide, and you know what? That's allowed as well. Life isn't a motorway with one exit you're supposed to take. I want you to really let that sink in. It is not a motorway with one exit you're supposed to take. And yet, we sometimes, I don't know, we seem to think we can't start something until we can guarantee where it's going to lead. Isn't that so true? What if I get it wrong? What if I change my mind? What if it doesn't work? What if I don't know what I'm doing? Oh my goodness, how many what ifs is there going to be? Well, what if you don't do it? Think about that. If you do it, you learn, you adjust, you turn around, maybe you choose another route. That's called life. Suck it up, baby. That is life. And I love the idea, and I've never really used one, but I love the idea of a compass. All right. Do you remember those old compasses? I don't even know if they still get it. Not because I'm going to sit here waving one around at you, but because of what a compass represents. A compass doesn't give you the entire journey. All right. Compass doesn't tell you what obstacles you'll meet. It doesn't tell you how long it's going to take. It doesn't promise sunshine every day. A compass doesn't say to you, don't worry, Tina, everything's going to be perfect from now on. It's going to go amazing for you now on. I mean, hey, wouldn't that be nice if it did? A compass just simply gives you a direction. And perhaps that's all that we need. Just a direction. Not a 10-year plan, not a 5-year plan, not every answer, not certainty, because let's face it, guys, nothing is certain in life. We just need a direction. And when I think about it, I chased a job title for years, but that wasn't really my direction. When my own life started changing, when I became ill, I couldn't have described to you everything that I'm doing today 7 years ago. I didn't know how it was going to change. I didn't have what I'm doing today all mapped out. I couldn't see every step. I didn't know I was going to be a successful online business owner and talk on stages globally and write a book and do a podcast. I didn't have a clue, but I knew I just wanted more. I wanted more freedom for myself. I wanted more time and more peace and more purpose and more control of my life. I wanted more time with my husband and my family and my kids and my grandkids, and more importantly, and I gotta say it, I wanted more of me back. And that became my direction. That was my direction. I wanted me back. And then I started taking those steps towards it. Some worked, some didn't. I fell, I got back up again. Some terrified me. Some surprised the hell out of me. Some took me to places I never expected to go. And that's the beautiful part of it. If I demanded back then that I knew exactly how everything was going to turn out before I took that first step, before I started my business, if I'd have demanded that, I'd probably still be waiting. I probably wouldn't have done it. I'd probably be still in that corporate rat race and have nothing to show for it. And my life would look very, very different today. And somewhere, and I don't know why we've been so conditioned, but we think certainty creates courage. It doesn't. And this is something I've really come to believe. We tend to think, once I'm certain, I'm going to be brave enough to do it. Once I know how everything's going to work out, I'm going to do it. Well, you're never going to know. So often it's the other way around. You take the step towards the life you want, then clarity comes. You try something and you discover you absolutely love it. Or you try something and discover you absolutely hate it. Brilliant! Guess what? You've learned something. That's progress too. It's progress. You meet somebody, you read something, you go somewhere, you say yes to something, you say no to something. And suddenly another piece of your life appears. Your life begins to reveal itself to you while you're actually living it. It doesn't reveal itself to you while you're sitting on the sidelines trying to predict how it's going to be. And I can absolutely hear somebody who's watching this asking, but Tina, what if I choose the wrong direction? I bet somebody out there now is saying that to me while they're listening to this or watching this. So my answer to you is, what if you do? Seriously, what if you do? What if you do choose the wrong direction? We've somehow been taught that changing our minds means we failed. I do not believe that for one instance. I don't believe it anymore. Sometimes changing your direction simply means that you've learned something that you didn't know when you started. That's it. You've learned something that you didn't know when you started. That, my friends, is called growth. You're allowed to outgrow dreams. All right? You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to change your goals and your dreams and your wants for your life. You're allowed, hear that strong, to decide that you want something so desperately. Now, 5 years ago, you didn't. You know, you can change your mind because you're not the same person you were back then. We all change as we grow up. We all change as we get older. Why should your dreams have to remain exactly the same? Somebody tell me. Why do they need to stay the same? They don't. And there's no too late, all right? And I really want to say this to anybody who's listening now thinking, do you know what, Tina, that's lovely. Everything you said's wonderful. But I'm too old to start figuring all this out now. Guys, get over yourself. No, you're not. You're not too old. You know, you don't suddenly become irrelevant because you think you're too old because you've reached a certain point in your life or a certain birthday or a certain milestone. You don't lose the right to dream at 50 or 60 or 70. You just don't, you know? You don't reach some invisible line where the universe suddenly says to you, well, sorry, you can't come in. That's it. You're done. You're done. No more new experiences for you. Yeah, should have decided years ago. You should have decided before you were 50. Oh, what's all that about? What a load of nonsense. What a load of absolute crap. You know, maybe you don't know, because you'll never know what the next 10 years are going to look like. So good. You know, there's possibility in that. There's excitement in that. Think about it. Not knowing is quite exciting. Maybe for the first time in years, you get to decide. You get to decide. Not your boss, not your parents, not society, not your kids, not your hubby, not the younger version of you who made choices with the information she had then. You get to decide because it's your life. You know? You get to decide because it's the person you are today who decides. That's it. And this is something I really, really want you to hear. You know, you're not lost. You're just simply between chapters of a book. There's a big difference. When one chapter finishes, the next one doesn't always start immediately. Sometimes you'll put the book down and go back to it. You know, sometimes there's a blank page in between the chapters. And blank pages can feel uncomfortable. We always want to be in control, don't we? We want to fill them so damn quickly. We want certainty when there isn't any. But here's the thing, what if the blank page isn't something to fear? What if that blank page is simply space? Maybe space for something you haven't imagined yet. Maybe it's space for a different version of you. Maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's space for a dream that couldn't have existed 10 years ago because you weren't the person you are today. Because we all change. We all change along the way. And I think there's something so incredibly exciting about it. I think it's so exciting not knowing where you're going to be. So my advice to you guys is, instead of asking yourself, what am I going to do with the rest of my life, which is a massive question in itself. Let's make it smaller. Okay, ask yourself, what do I want more of? Ask yourself that. What do I want more of? And also ask yourself, what do I want less of? That's it. What do I want more of? And what do I want less of? And maybe you want to slow down. Maybe you want to rush around less, Maybe you want more mornings where you can actually taste your coffee instead of slugging it down and running out the door. Maybe you want less pressure, more peace. Maybe you want to be less of a people-pleasing type of person, Maybe you want to create boundaries. Maybe you want to scroll through social media less. Maybe you want to be more creative. Maybe you want to absolutely stop worrying about what everybody else thinks about you, which is none of your business, which we've said before. And maybe you want to do more things that make you feel alive. And less of, I should be doing that, to more, I choose to do that. And when you make all these changes, suddenly you have a direction in life. And there's another question, guys, that I'd love you to start asking yourself, And that question is not what should I do, but the question you should start asking yourself is, what feels more like me? That's a very different story, because when you say should, that usually comes from the outside, what society expects of you, what your family expects from you, what your colleagues and work may expect of you, or your boss expects of you, things that you've always done because you shoulda, woulda, coulda, But ask yourself, what feels like you? Maybe it's going for a country walk. Maybe it's painting or writing or traveling the world, starting something or learning something, walking more, working less, creating a successful online business. Maybe it's leaving a business. Maybe it's volunteer work or dancing like nobody's watching. Maybe it's going back to university or starting a new course, or buying a bloody camper van and disappearing around Europe for 6 months. Doesn't that sound amazing? What feels more like you? What feels more like you? I don't know. And that's the point. I don't need to know, because it's your direction. It's your direction in life. Stop asking everybody else for directions. Stop. Because that's what we usually do. That's what we usually do. We get a little idea, we get a tiny spark of an idea, and immediately, what do? We go out and we ask 15 people what they think. We have to ask everybody. And suddenly, we get completely confused. One person says, go for it, Tina. Another one says, oh, I wouldn't do that if I were you. A bit dodgy that, Oh, totally, yeah, don't do that. So, and then someone else knows somebody whose cousin's neighbour dog tried it, something similar in 1987, and apparently it went terribly. Why do we do it? Before we even know it, that beautiful spark of an idea we had has gone. It's vanished. It's being put out just like that. Crazy. And I'm not saying, don't take advice, because seriously, you do need to take advice sometimes. But what I'm saying is, be careful who you hand your compass to, because somebody else's fear can very quickly become your limitation, can't it? So I really encourage you to listen, to learn, to do your research for your idea, And then at some point, come back to yourself and say, what do I want? What feels right for me? What direction do I want my life to move in? Because that's all you need to do. You only need to take that next step. You don't need to take 100 steps. You just need to take one. That's all. One conversation, one application, one phone call, one walk, one new course, one class, one book, one step, one decision. 1 hour well spent researching. You're curious. Just do it. Just do it, guys. Just that one yes can absolutely change your life. Or maybe sometimes that one no that can be very necessary. You choose. And then you just see what happens. Because that can absolutely change your life. And that one step gives you that information that standing still never can. Never can. And that brings me beautifully onto that one small step for this week, which we talk about. No sticky notes this time, no complicated exercise that we've talked about in the past. Take a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle. And on one side you write less. And on the other side, you write more. That's it, simple. One piece of paper, line down the middle, less and more. And don't overthink it, guys. Just write, I want less of whatever it may be. It could be stress, it could be rushing around, it could be comparing yourself to other people, it could be pressure, whatever comes into your mind, write it down. And then on the other side, where you put more, I want more of what? More time, more adventure in your life, more purpose. You want more passion or connection or friendships or creativity, more travel, more peace, more joy, more harmony, more fun in your life, more freedom. What do you want more of? You decide. You hold that pen. When you finished it, take a good look at it. Look at the more. Look at what you want. Really, really look at it. Take it all in. Because perhaps you just found your compass. You just found your direction. You just found what you want. You just found what you're starting to move towards. And you just found more of what makes you feel alive. So, today's Tina thought, before I leave you, which I always like to do each week. And boy, it's been a long one today, but I had so much I wanted to talk to you about, And here's the thing, and the most important thought is you don't need to know exactly where you're going. Sometimes you just need to know which direction feels more like you. And I want you to sit with that thought because that's so important for you in your life. So important. Because sometimes we spend months, we spend years, we spend so much time telling ourselves that we're lost. And maybe you're not lost at all. Maybe you're simply standing at the beginning of something beautiful and you haven't discovered it yet. And when you take that one small step, your life changes. Your life changes, and that is just a completely different way of looking at it. Completely different way. So this is me, but it's all about you. And if you're listening today and thinking, I don't know what's next, then good. Good. It's worked. What I've said has worked because you don't have to know what's next. So please, please, if you take anything from this today, stop putting yourself under pressure. Stop putting yourself under that pressure to have the rest of your life figured out, because you don't have to. You don't have to have a 5-year plan. You don't have to have a year plan. You aren't behind. You know, you're not behind anybody. You haven't missed some imaginary deadline of anything. It's never too late. Never too late for you. You're living, you're learning, you're growing, you're changing, and you are becoming the best version of you, you know? And maybe the question isn't, where am I going? Maybe the question is, you know, it's just simply, which direction feels more like me? Which direction feels like me? And when you realize that, just take that step. Just take that little step, just one, and see where it leads. Because it's an amazing feeling. And you look back and you realize something so crazy, is that that tiny step that you almost didn't take was the beginning of an entirely new chapter. It's an amazing feeling. I can vouch for it. So thank you as always for spending this time with me today. And as I said, it's been a long one, but I have so much to say to you. And you know, if you know somebody out there who's feeling a little lost at the moment, you know, maybe somebody who's putting pressure on themselves all the time to have everything figured out when they're never gonna, then send them this episode. Share it with them. Because maybe they don't need another person telling them what they should do. You know, maybe they just simply need somebody to, I don't know, to remind them how wonderful they are, and to remind them that it's actually okay not to have everything figured out. So until next Monday, guys, keep believing, keep growing, and just keep discovering what it feels like to be you, the real you. And most importantly, choose you every single damn day. So I'm Tina Willis, and this has been episode 12 of This Is Me, but it's all about you. Believe every day, grow every day, and choose you every day. Till next time, love you all lots. Bye for now.